Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Almost Dropouts podcast. My name is Daivik, and today I have Danilo. Danilo, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi. Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm a 4A going into 4A software engineering student at the University of Waterloo, and I'm also a co-founder of Scena 360, which I'll be talking about today, which is an online 3D gathering platform that makes meeting up online more delightful for everyone.
Great. Yeah. So, let's just get right into it. Let's talk about Cena 360, what it is, who the product is for, and yeah, let's just go on from there.
Sure. So, like I said, Scena 360, our mission is to make meeting up online more delightful for everyone.
Mhm.
At the beginning of the pandemic, my co-founder, Anshuman Banka, who's also in software engineering, and I decided we were kind of sick of Zoom, and so was everyone around us. Same goes with anything else. So we decided to look more into the space, get our hands dirty, and build something that we thought would make meeting up online more fun and delightful for everyone. And
Mhm.
that's what Scena 360 is, and that's what we're trying to be. So along like when we started Scena 360, it was initially designed for completely different use cases, and then through interviews, research, and so on, and like refining our product, we've discovered several use cases that worked better for people. So one of those is education, so online classes, tutorials, stuff like that. But also online events such as conferences, meetups, networking sessions. And we've previously hosted all kinds of events on Scena 360, even birthday parties. So
Mhm.
it's tailored for anyone, any form of gathering, the same way Zoom or GatherTown or any of those products. But we mainly focus on events and education. But I'll also discuss some of the other stuff that we're working on closer to the end of the podcast. Yeah.
Mhm. For sure. And so I guess, just for context for our users, I think one of the biggest difference between, traditional web conferencing tool and what you guys have is that you guys have these virtual environments and virtual avatars that represent people. So what was sort of the thought process behind that? And why did you guys decide to go that route rather than the traditional virtual conferencing?
Yeah, so initially, one of the things that inspired us to focus on Cena 360 was that I was one of those types of people that would always have their camera turned off in
Yeah,
meetings. I hated like having people stare at my face all day. I
for
think it might
sure.
have been a confidence or image issue at the beginning. If it's a one-on-one call, usually I don't have a problem with it. But when you're in a team meeting or like a class or anything with more than like five people, or if it's not just friends and family, people tend to turn off their cameras. Even when you have like a call with friends, sometimes people just like to have their cameras turned off, and we
For
realize that's
sure.
not a natural way to go forward. Like we can't continue to like progress through the pandemic and post-pandemic just like staring at blank tiles on a screen. So that
Mhm.
was one of the things that we try to solve. But actually, we're not just like an avatar platform, which is something that we're trying to change. Like in our marketing and in our pictures, usually people will focus just on the avatars. But
Mhm.
we did have spatial video for a while now. So and we still obviously do have spatial video, so you can still have your camera turned on and see people's faces. But if you do turn off your camera, it's better to interact with like a humanoid person
Right.
in the metaverse rather than just like a blank tile. Um,
Right.
the the other thing is we found that most other existing platforms, like going into the space, we knew like who were like the other players in the space when we started, and we realized that there was a kind of a gap where all these platforms were using avatars that either look like way too human or like not human at all. So people would like show up as like wolves or robots, and we
Mhm.
thought that was also unnatural. And then there were the ones that were too human that look like a bit too creepy because of the uncanny valley. So we're kind of like in the middle there where it's not too creepy, but also still human.
Right. Right. And that has that formal aspect then too. So if you have business conferences or work conferences, it's not necessarily everybody's walking around as a wolf or themselves, right?
Yes,
Uh,
exactly, exactly. Yeah.
for sure. I can definitely see the merit to that. And definitely like, when I'm in a Zoom conference and I'm the only one on video and everybody else has their video off, sometimes it feels like you're talking completely to a blank wall. So I can
Yeah.
definitely see at least an avatar is one step closer to that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. With Cena 360, you can the main like benefit of having an avatar that can like move around and like hop up and down or like nod their head or turn like around is you still have some body language even if you don't have your webcam turned on. And that's really
right.
important. Like I mentioned earlier, in a classroom setting or when you're meeting new people, most of that language is or not most of it, but part of that is body language. And teachers want to know whether their students are paying attention. People in meetings, like managers, they want to know whether people are paying attention. When you're going to an event, when you're talking to someone, you want to know that who you're talking with, right? And form actual connections.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. And then so in terms of like the avatar's movement, is that do you just like transit the voice into like them talking and body movements, or how does that work? Does somebody control it?
So right now, the way you move around the space, like Scena 360 at the moment is desktop and mobile based via
Mhm.
the web, so you don't have to install anything, and
Oh,
you
great.
just use your arrow keys, or if you on your phone, you can like move your phone to look around. So we
Right.
found that is more natural. Like if you want to turn towards someone, you can physically turn with your body towards that person, not look at them, which we think is pretty cool. But eventually, in the very, very near future, Scena 360 will be available like in VR and AR as well. But right
Hmm.
now it's like a standard arrow keys, kind of like a video game,
Hmm.
but not too complicated, so that people, even in a business setting that have never played like video games before, could still figure it out.
Hmm. Wow, so that's actually really impressive. So it's a web application, so it's
Yeah.
no downloads or anything. So if you don't mind me sharing, like how did you end up building that out? That's pretty tough.
I mean, it's been tough. Like we've been working on Cena 360 for it's been a while, like
Yeah.
May since the pandemic. Yeah, beginning of the pandemic.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a while. With the main technologies we use are A-Frame, which under the hood also uses 3JS, and we use some 3JS stuff too. That's a
Hmm.
JavaScript library that makes it easier to build 3D experiences on the web. So you
Right.
don't have to understand like graphics programming that well. You don't need to learn like shading and shader languages and stuff. It's all abstracted for you.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's like there is a lot of logic that goes on behind the scenes. So
Right.
A-Frame and 3JS is mainly for the virtual reality and like 3D stuff side of things, and then for like audio and everything else, we have some like Node.js stuff, Media Soup, and Golang as well. So yeah.
Right. Oh, that's super impressive. Yeah, it's super hard to make like a web a web app instead of native apps, especially for these areas. So that's pretty impressive that you guys are doing that. I think that's definitely a big thing that stands out between your guys' offering and any other metaverse or offering I've seen in the metaverse. So that's really interesting.
What we found actually at the beginning when we were interviewing people, our initial hypothesis was like all these other platforms, they require you to have like a headset. They have a huge barrier to like even try the product. You have to install some software either on your computer or on your headset. Then you have to go through like a long onboarding process, create your avatar from scratch. And then we looked at
Right.
all those like steps that make it annoying to use those products. Like they are good once you are in them. So I've personally used like VR chat, I've used Altspace, I've used Spatial, I've used like all of those, but the barrier of entry to those products is a bit challenging, especially if you're onboarding like a conference or a bunch of people. Because if you multiply like 10 minutes for yourself, may not be too much time, but if you're hosting an event, you don't want to make every attendee spend 10
Yeah,
minutes trying to set it up. Instead, you want them to join like right away.
for sure.
Um, so that's the main reason it's web based now. That doesn't necessarily mean we won't have a desktop or like native version, but it
Right.
is like near native functionality since we do use technologies that
Right.
are more optimized. It's like the web is different now than it was 10 years ago.
100%. Yeah, like the power that the web has is it's much different. And I think yeah, like that cross-platform nature and the accessibility is so important. So it's really I think that's a huge competitive advantage for you guys. Um, but yeah, I guess so. Diving a little bit deeper into the product itself, I know you mentioned the virtual environments and people can walk around the virtual environments. So how does that work? Like, is there one virtual environment that you guys just made originally, and that's where all these conferences are held, or can it be changed, or how does that work?
Yeah, so initially we started off with like a very basic one in our MVP stage. So when we were building like the first version of Scena, we weren't too focused on like what the scene will look like, more so like being able to hear other people and just the minimum requirements to like have a conversation with someone or a group of people. But then eventually we started adopting open source scenes and then purchasing like new scenes. And the goal is to create our own as well. So we're working
Right.
with architects and designers and stuff to get those. But yeah, there are different environments for different use cases. So we offer, for instance, a lounge scene. So you could host like a networking session or a mixer or like a gallery event in our
Hmm.
lounge space. We also have like a big gathering hall for larger events like conferences or fairs and stuff.
Hmm.
And then we also have like smaller spaces, so like a campfire or a classroom. So if you're hosting like a small fireside chat or like a small meetup with friends and family,
Right.
you can get cozy around a fire.
Right. That makes sense. And then in terms of like those where you got those environments from, are they all self-built or have you reached the point where it's available open source right now?
So our scenes, like if you were to go on Mozilla Hubs or Mozilla Spoke, you could
Hmm.
find like user-generated content that's licensed
Okay.
under like Creative Commons, so anyone can use it for even commercial uses as long as you give like attribution.
Right.
So yeah, there are 3D scenes out there. The good ones usually do come with a price.
Right.
But the other thing is like to have what's it called? Like the design of your scenes work in your favor. They do have to have like a bit of consistency and also uniqueness. So if we're using someone else's scenes, everyone else is going to see us as like another product. When they like initially people when they would open Scena, they'd be like, "This is just like Mozilla Hubs." When the only
Right.
thing that we were using from Mozilla Hubs was like the environment, everything else, the code, the audio, the buttons, everything was designed and made by us. So we learned
Hmm.
like we need to kind of pivot away from that, and that's why we're working on our own new scenes that will have like the unique
Right.
Scena 360 feeling.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. No, that's super interesting actually. I didn't know we were at the point where there's actually like an open source community for this where you can get scenes and and use it under the Creative Commons license. That's that's really exciting, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's gonna get better. Like, unfortunately, though, I believe it was sometime last year in the summer, Google had a product called Google Poly that was like a
Right.
marketplace for a bunch of different 3D models and assets you could download, and most of them were free and under Creative Commons, but they decided to shut it down. I assume it's because they weren't really profiting from that product. It was more so of like pro bono kind of, but
Hmm.
um, yeah, like I hope people will continue to make more platforms like that. I think NFTs are also going to be a good means for exchanging and like um, offering 3D models to the public. Like you can already download and buy um, 3D models on OpenSea and other marketplaces that I've seen. So
Right.
I think there's a lot of potential there as well.
Yeah, I think maybe Google Poly shut down 1 year too early because I'm sure now, especially with everybody so interested in the metaverse and just 3D in general, I think it would have got a lot more traffic.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um, cool. Yeah, I think so. Talking a little bit more about the product, I know one of the biggest concerns in the metaverse and just in 3D conferencing in general is privacy. So, in terms of what you guys are doing for privacy, how are you guys addressing that point that a lot of people bring up?
Yeah, well, like when the news came out that Facebook was becoming Meta as like their parent company and focusing mostly on the metaverse from now on,
Hmm.
there were a lot of people, skeptics, and people that didn't trust Facebook to build a metaverse. Everyone was saying, no, Facebook shouldn't own the metaverse. Like, no one's gonna trust this. It's gonna invade everyone's privacy. Like, you're gonna live, like we already live lives that are centered around social media and big tech companies like consuming our data, and then
Hmm.
having like a second life in the metaverse, where like every conversation is being listened on, and yeah, like it would be hard for Facebook to gain people's trust. But with Cena 360, when we started, we were really, really like privacy focused. We wanted to like not collect any data at all, like nothing.
Right.
We wanted like fully anonymous, anyone can join in. But then we ran into a few challenges. For instance, when you want to scale up and have more people in a room, then you can't have like peer-to-peer networking between people. So before Cena
Right.
360 was entirely peer-to-peer. Like when you join a space, we can't even eavesdrop, but we still are focused on privacy. Like we only collect the data that we do need to operate the product, like for security reasons and stuff. We don't
Right.
sell any data. We don't eavesdrop on any conversations. And our goal is also to provide end-to-end encryption on web browsers once it becomes available, like with the technologies available. One of those is like insertable streams. Google Chrome is already in beta for that, so we assume it's going to be possible really soon.
Right.
But yeah, there are a lot of like security scandals as well with Zoom over the past years, um, such as like Zoom bombing. Then there's also like their lies about end-to-end encryption. For years, they told investors and customers that they offer end-to-end encryption for everyone, but the reality was that they don't, and that they were also eavesdropping on conversations. So yeah, our
Right.
promise is that we'll never do that and like mislead the public, obviously. The
Hmm.
other thing is Zoom bombing was also scary. Most of the users that we spoke with and teachers, people would jump into calls, show like very provocative stuff to
Right.
children, and that was annoying for a lot of people. So we built in those security and like anti-Zoom bombing measures into Scena
Okay.
very early on before it ever became a problem.
Right.
It's still a problem in like other platforms. I've heard from users like that use Mozilla Hubs because it's a bit more open and liberal with like what you can do in the platform.
Yeah.
That it can also be a bit dangerous for hosting like a private event. So yeah, privacy is top of mind. So is security. We do focus a lot on like making sure that only those that are invited can enter a space. You
Right.
can only access the data that like you own or that's in the space, and also limiting only the data that is necessary like between attendees as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, and because it's web based, it's also kind of sandbox. Like Zoom had a lot of issues where hackers could just um, do remote code execution. If there was like a small vulnerability, hackers could pretty much hack anyone that had Zoom installed on their computer, run any code. But since we're web
Right.
based, those issues aren't like specific to Scena 360. They would be more like on the Chrome or Sandbox level.
Right. Right. That makes sense. Yeah, and I think one interesting point that I just thought about when you were highlighting that is with I have a friend who used to work at Microsoft, and he mentioned that Microsoft Teams didn't really wasn't really ready for all the people who are going to come
Yeah,
onto it, right? And it's all these platforms like with Zoom or any of the video conferencing platforms. When the pandemic started, a lot of them weren't ready for it, so a lot of them got exposed to security vulnerabilities that they didn't necessarily had to deal with before, they didn't know existed. So I think what's really interesting about what you guys are doing at CNET 360 is because you guys were born during the pandemic, or you guys started working on it during the pandemic. A lot of these security vulnerabilities can be have been addressed at the very beginning because of
yeah.
whatever's been exposed. So that sort of gives you that advantage as well compared to the other providers who have to now scramble and and fix the code later on, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. And then in terms of what competitive edge you think CNET 360 has, I know like Meta recently also has their offering with virtual conferences. So what do you think the main competitive edge that you guys have compared to Facebook or Meta?
yeah. So initially, when we started Scena 360, we did like competitive research to like figure out who are like the top players, who should we who like who's on our radar kind of, and figure
Mm-hmm.
out like what problems are they not focusing on that we should focus on. And at the beginning, it was mainly like Gather and a few others.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there are products that do serve the same purpose. You could compare like any product has competing products. That's the whole point of capitalism, like not having just one business do everything, right?
Right.
But yeah, we are focusing on um, fixing the problems that others aren't focusing on. We think where like when we heard the news about Meta, we thought it was actually a good thing. It's better to have validation from like a big tech company entering the space and have confidence
Right.
that like we're just gonna like shift the whole focus of the company on metaverse stuff. So that gave us validation, not necessarily cause for concern and panic. Like, oh no, like they're gonna steal all of our ideas. They're just gonna copy Cena 360. The other thing that we've noticed is all of their marketing and like the current products that they have that are focused on the metaverse are all only like available to headset owners. So if you have
Right.
AR glasses or VR glasses owned by Facebook, then you can access those tools. And if you don't, like it's going to be very hard to bridge it on desktop because then you
Right.
still end up with the situation where you have to download like a desktop client and Facebook has to make like a whole desktop version of every VR product that they offer. And I
Right.
think some of those will actually be cool and useful like in VR. But our main focus right now is like those same value propositions that we decided to offer from like the get go, like being having a low barrier of entry, so like quick onboarding experience, being able to join
Yeah.
in a web browser, like join really quickly. That's something I think we'll always have over like any alternative.
Right.
Right now, I'm pretty sure we have the fastest onboarding experience for 3D gathering platforms. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are 2D gathering platforms that have comparable efficiency, but when it comes to 3D, I think ours is leading there.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think it's just mostly validation that there's a lot of players in the space. Some like most people, or skeptics, they'll be like, "Oh, this market's saturated. There's too many competitors." But I don't think they've acquired or captured even like half the market yet,
Right.
because the products aren't there yet. Like GatherTown has a lot of users. All these other platforms, they have a lot of users, but they haven't captured the same market um, to the like scale of Zoom. So Zoom like has, I believe, over 600 million users.
Right.
The 3D gathering and like metaverse platforms are nowhere close to that yet. So we're not where it is, but it
Right.
is kind of a race of like who will be the top one.
Mhm.
Our goal is like not to think too much about, oh, we need X amount of users. We learned that like that causes a lot of stress. More so focus on making the product delightful for even like a small group of people
Right.
is rewarding.
Right, that makes sense. And I think like when you look at what Meta is trying to achieve, they're using the metaverse right now to sort of sell people on Oculus. So trying to sell the platform as well,
Yeah,
which is probably good for their long term business model because they can be the lead right now, I guess, on the headset game. But at the
yeah,
same time, if you look at what people have right now, majority of people do not have a headset. So
yeah,
the access to virtual conferencing can only be done on smartphones and traditional platforms. So it makes a lot of sense there where you guys are addressing that sect of the population that doesn't have headsets right now, or maybe who won't have headset at all. Because honestly, I think there's a lot of people who are a little bit skeptical or a little bit, uh, they don't trust it as much, I guess. So
yeah, yeah. I think yeah, there's definitely going to be like cost barriers, and you're right, definitely skepticism is going to get in the way, but I think they will become more ubiquitous. Like eventually, a lot of people will have headsets the same way a lot of people have iPhones now.
mhm.
That's a few years from now, I would estimate, but there still will be challenges with that. The other thing is like that I've noticed is Meta's trying to replace a lot of like in-person stuff with just creating like a replica in a virtual world, so simulating what is like the real world like in the virtual world. But
Right.
like the constraints aren't the constraints in the virtual world are not the same as like real world constraints. So I think that's something that we can also um, focus on improving. Like no one wants to live in just a virtual copy of the real world. They want to live like in an expanded or augmented world where
Right.
you have like more possibilities than you do in the real one. Otherwise, it seems kind of silly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Why would you just want to live another version of your life just digitally, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess sort of moving from the product itself. We talked about Cena 360. Let's just talk more about like the metaverse in general. Like as an expert now in the space, what excites you about the metaverse, and yeah, what's some really exciting trends in the metaverse right now for you?
yeah. I've been following. Like I actually like to preface anything I say is I've seen in the media that the word metaverse is sometimes overused or like too broad. Like people that make like a VR like training tool will say like we're a metaverse company, or like
Right.
anything that involves crypto or VR now is like labeled as metaverse. But the definition that most people in like the tech communities that I'm in refer to metaverse when it's strictly just like a 3D or even just like a virtual gathering space for people to join in. So
Hmm.
usually it has like a multiplayer element. Usually it has like a social element. Anything like
Hmm.
that's outside of that. So crypto like is kind of related and tied to that because it's like a means for doing commerce like in the metaverse. But yeah, that was my, like to preface whatever else I have to say. But what
Right.
excites me the most, I would say, is the like possibility of NFTs in the metaverse.
Hmm.
I've noticed a lot of platforms that used to be seen as kind of like fringe platforms are now gaining a lot of traction, even raising a lot of money from investors, like Sandbox, Decentraland, all of those like Ethereum based metaverses. So you can buy and own virtual land in those spaces and buy like buildings. You can buy virtual stuff, which I think is pretty neat. But I think there's a lot more potential there than just owning like virtual goods. Like that's not a new concept. That like you could buy stuff in other video games like RuneScape. You could buy like stuff in Club Penguin, right? But
Hmm.
what's interesting is like the proof of ownership and like having an ecosystem, a kind of bridge between those applications. Like if you connect your wallet in one world, you can carry over that currency into other platforms, which I think is pretty cool. Like before
Right.
with RuneScape, you couldn't like take your RuneScape gold and then use it for something else, or like have everything kind of interconnected. So I think
Right.
the bridging between platforms is really cool. I really hope that Meta considers like bridging with other platforms because there are a lot of ones where you can like buy virtual stuff. You can like gamble on horses in the metaverse. I think there's a lot of like cool things, but if you bridge all those together, I think there's a lot more potential. So that kind of excites me, the bridging between different platforms and ecosystems. So like you can use an avatar across different platforms. That's something that we actually already offer. If you create an avatar in Cena 360, you can use it in like over 1,000 other metaverse platforms.
Oh
So if
wow.
you wanted to use it in Scena 360 and then use the same avatar in Mozilla Hubs, or other platforms that aren't even like metaverse related, more so like for business, for training, for anything, then
Mhm.
you could still use that same avatar, and that's through Ready Player Me, which is our avatar partner.
Right. Right. But then how would that integration work? Like how would the avatar get translated into a different platform? How does that do you know how that works in terms of a technical standpoint or?
Yeah, yeah. So the like partner, it's mainly through partnerships. So if a company wants to integrate with those other metaverse platforms,
Right.
basically they partner with the partner company. So in this case, like the avatar provider, and then they can embed um, the same avatar creation like software in their software that's
Mhm.
the same and consistent across other metaverse platforms. So if you use Ready Player Me avatars in Scena 360, we have a little embedded Ready Player Me window. It's the same software that runs on like Mozilla Hubs. It's like partner software.
Right.
I think it will become a bit like become better as like the web evolves,
Right.
and more seamless, but it's still technically like a good way of interconnecting between the platforms.
Right.
Because for now, I don't see that much like connectivity. The other way is like MetaMask and other wallet providers. So if you own cryptocurrency and you store it in MetaMask, I know there's other wallets out there, but MetaMask seems to be one of the more popular ones.
For sure.
You
Yeah.
can access um, like your virtual assets and use them through across other platforms, and I think that's pretty cool. And it's also a form of like it's kind of like a passport as well. It's your identity. So when you go
Right.
from like decentralized to crypto voxels, the thing that remains constant is your wallet. So
Mhm.
the platforms can identify you, and um, yeah, you can have like all those things connected together through your wallet. And I think there's going to
Right.
be more potential just from like not withdrawing and using like the wallet to buy virtual stuff. There's going to be definitely more potential
Right.
um, with that. So yeah,
Right. And then I don't know how much you can disclose here, but in terms of CNET 360, do you see like are you guys thinking about integration with the overall metaverse and specifically in crypto and Web3 with these different platforms like MetaMask and stuff like that?
yeah, we definitely are considering it. It's like the next or the thing that we're currently working on as well.
Mm-hmm.
I can't disclose exactly what it is, but it is Web3 related, and we're pretty excited about it. We've struggled a lot to what's it called, like reach where we are right now.
Right.
We're fully bootstrapped, so like operating for this long and like putting in a ton of effort. Like this is my second full-time co-op working on Cena 360 full-time.
Right.
So it's a bit um, yeah, it's a bit overwhelming, like putting in so much effort and not seeing like the reward you expect. But we think with like the next project we're working on, or the current one actually that we're working on, is gonna um, draw a bit more traction. So yeah,
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's super exciting, and I guess yeah, like I think that it's been a pretty interesting conversation. So just to wrap up, I guess what are the sort of the next steps for you and Cena 360 as a whole?
yeah. So like I mentioned, right now I'm working full time on Cena 360. The goal is to achieve our mission, which is to make meeting up online more delightful for everyone.
Mhm.
So the next steps are exactly that, and like we haven't fully reached that yet because it's not for everyone yet, and it's also not the most delightful it can be, or like we're still like overcoming hurdles like performance issues, like the reliability has gotten much better, but yeah, we have
Right.
long way to go before Cena 360 is as ubiquitous as Zoom or Google Meet. But
Right.
yeah, those are kind of the next steps. And the other thing I mentioned earlier was that focusing more on Web3 and bridging together with other metaverse stuff. Yeah,
For sure. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Super interesting hearing about your product. I'll leave all the links for Cena 360 down below. And yeah, thank you so much, Danilo. It was really great talking to you.
awesome. And could I mention just one last thing
For sure.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
for anyone listening to the podcast, I'd like to offer a promotion to use Cena 360 for 1 month, Cena 360 Premium for 1 month off, which is worth about $300 in or up to $300 in credits.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you use code Cena almost dropouts, you'll gain access to 1 month off Cena 360 Premium. No credit card required, and you can cancel at any time.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll
And
leave
thank you so
that
much
in
for
the
having me on the podcast.
for sure. Yeah, and I'll leave that all on the show notes so you guys can have access to that.
Awesome.
And yeah, make sure you get on that. Maybe I'll probably get on that as well.
Okay,
Um,
awesome.
and yeah, thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Bye bye.